Welcome to the shadows of history, where truth and legend collide on the rolling waves of the Caribbean. You've seen the movies, haven't you? The dashing captain with his perfectly groomed beard, swinging from rope to rope with a charming smile and a witty quip. You've heard the tales of buried treasure and talking parrots, of honourable rogues who fight for justice on the high seas. But what if I told you that almost everything you think you know about pirates is completely wrong? The real Golden Age of Piracy, spanning roughly from 1650 to 1730, was nothing like the romantic adventure stories we've been told. It was a world of desperate men making desperate choices, where the line between survival and starvation was as thin as a ship's rope in a hurricane. These weren't noble rebels fighting against tyranny. They were ordinary sailors, pushed beyond their breaking point by a system so cruel and unforgiving that risking death by hanging seemed like a reasonable alternative. Tonight, we're going to strip away 3 centuries of myth and romance to reveal what life was actually like for the men who sailed under the black flag. We'll discover why thousands of sailors willingly chose a path that almost certainly led to a violent death. We'll explore the brutal realities they faced every single day, from the backbreaking labour to the constant threat of disease, starvation, and the hangman's noose. And perhaps most surprisingly, we'll uncover the democratic society they created, a floating republic more progressive than most nations of their time. But before we set sail into these dangerous waters, I want you to understand something crucial. The story I'm about to tell you isn't just about pirates. It's about ordinary people pushed to extraordinary circumstances. It's about the birth of democracy in the most unlikely place imaginable. And it's about how desperation can drive human beings to create something entirely new, something that would challenge the very foundations of the world they knew. So settle in as we leave behind everything you think you know about pirates and discover the shocking truth about what it was really like to be one during their legendary Golden Age. Our journey begins not with cannons firing or treasure chests overflowing with gold, but in the filthy, cramped quarters of a merchant ship in the year 1715. The air is thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and something far worse, the smell of human misery. This is where our story truly starts, because to understand why men became pirates, you first need to understand what they were running from. Picture yourself as Thomas Hartwell, a 23-year-old sailor from Bristol. You've been at sea for 8 months now, and every single day has been a living hell. Your hands are permanently stained black from the tar used to seal the ship's ropes, and your fingers are split and bleeding from hauling the heavy canvas sails in weather that ranges from scorching heat to bone-chilling cold. The work never stops. 4 hours on watch, 4 hours off, in an endless cycle that continues day and night without pause. During your watch, you're constantly adjusting the rigging, scrubbing the deck with rough stones to prevent the deadly slick of algae, or pumping the foul bilge water that perpetually seeps into the ship's hull. When you're off watch, you're trying to sleep in a hammock slung so close to your shipmates that you can smell their breath and feel their body heat. The food is barely fit for animals. Your daily ration consists of hardtack, a biscuit so hard it has to be soaked in water just to be chewed, and it's usually crawling with black beetles called weevils. The meat is salt pork or beef that's been sitting in barrels for months, so saturated with brine that it burns your mouth and leaves you desperately thirsty. The water itself is green and slimy, stored in wooden casks, where it quickly becomes a breeding ground for bacteria and algae. But the worst part isn't the work or the food, or even the constant threat of storms that could send you to the bottom of the ocean in minutes. The worst part is the absolute power that your captain holds over your life. He can order you flogged for the smallest infraction, for being too slow to respond to a command, for showing anything that might be interpreted as disrespect, or simply because he woke up in a bad mood. The cat-o'-nine-tails, a whip with multiple knotted cords, can turn a man's back into a mass of bloody flesh with just a few lashes. You've seen strong men reduced to screaming, sobbing children under its bite. And there's no appeal, no trial, no justice. The captain's word is law, and his law is enforced by the whip. Even worse than the physical brutality is the economic exploitation. You won't see a single penny of your wages until the voyage is complete, if you see them at all. Captains routinely cheat their crews, inventing fines and deductions that can reduce months of hard labor to a few shillings. If you die during the voyage, which happens with frightening regularity, your family receives nothing. If the ship is lost, you receive nothing. If you're injured and can no longer work, you're simply abandoned at the next port with whatever clothes are on your back. This is the world that created pirates. Not romantic adventure or a love of freedom, but a system so oppressive and cruel that men were willing to risk everything just to escape it. The Merchant Marine and the Royal Navy were essentially floating prisons where ordinary sailors were treated worse than slaves, because at least slaves represented an investment that their owners wanted to protect. Now imagine you're Thomas Hartwell again, and after 8 months of this hell, you spot a sail on the horizon. It's moving fast, faster than any merchant vessel should be able to move, and it's heading straight for your ship. The captain begins shouting orders, his voice cracking with fear, but you can see in his eyes that he knows it's hopeless. Your heavy cargo-laden vessel can't outrun the sleek predator bearing down on you. As the strange ship draws closer, you notice something that makes your blood run cold. There are far too many men on its deck, far more than would be needed for honest trade. And then you see it, the flag that strikes terror into the hearts of merchant sailors across the Caribbean. It's not the skull and crossbones of legend, but a simple black banner that means just one thing: no quarter, no mercy, no escape. But here's where our story takes an unexpected turn. As the pirates swarm aboard your vessel, cutlasses gleaming and pistols ready, their leader doesn't order his men to kill everyone in sight. Instead, he calls for order and addresses your crew with words that will change everything you thought you knew about these so-called enemies of mankind. "Gentlemen," the Quartermaster announces, his voice carrying easily across the deck, "we have no quarrel with honest sailors. We're here for your cargo, not your lives, but we're also here to offer you a choice that your captain would never give you. You can stay with this ship, continue your voyage, and face the same misery you've always known. Or you can join us and become free men, entitled to an equal share of everything we take." The words hit you like a physical blow. A choice? In your entire life at sea, no one has ever offered you a choice. Captains give orders, and sailors obey them or face the whip. But these pirates, these supposed criminals and outcasts, are treating you like a human being with the right to decide your own fate. You look around at your fellow crew members and see the same stunned recognition in their eyes. This isn't how pirates are supposed to behave. They're supposed to be bloodthirsty monsters, not men offering democracy and equality to common sailors. But as you listen to the Quartermaster explain their system of shares, their articles of agreement, and their promise that every man gets an equal vote in the company's affairs, you begin to understand something that will reshape your entire worldview. These pirates haven't rejected civilization. They've created a better one. The Quartermaster continues his speech, and with every word, the contrast between your old life and this new possibility becomes starker. No more arbitrary punishments from tyrannical captains. No more stolen wages or invented fines. No more watching helplessly as your shipmates are flogged for minor infractions. Instead, a society where every man is equal, where decisions are made by majority vote, and where the profits are shared fairly among all who risk their lives to earn them. But this choice comes with a price, and the Quartermaster is honest about it. Life as a pirate means constant danger, not just from naval patrols and pirate hunters, but from the very nature of the work itself. It means accepting that you'll probably die young, most likely at the end of a rope in some colonial port. It means giving up any hope of returning to normal society, of having a family, of growing old in peace. Yet as you weigh this terrible choice, you realize that your current life offers no real hope either. You're already risking death every day from disease, accident, or the brutal discipline of merchant service. You're already cut off from any meaningful future, trapped in a cycle of exploitation that will grind you down until the sea or sickness finally claims you. The only difference is that as a pirate, you'd at least die as a free man. 3 sailors from your crew step forward. They're tired, desperate men with nothing left to lose, just like you. And in that moment, watching them cross from one ship to the other, you see the birth of something unprecedented in human history. A society of outcasts who've decided to govern themselves according to principles of equality and democracy that won't be seen in the legitimate world for another century. The transformation is immediate and startling. As soon as you set foot on the pirate vessel, one of the crew hands you a tin mug filled with grog, the mixture of rum and water that serves as the lifeblood of sailors everywhere. But this grog tastes different somehow, not because of what's in it, but because of what it represents. For the first time in your life, you're drinking as an equal among equals, not as a servant receiving a ration from your betters. The ship itself tells a story of this radical democracy. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of a merchant vessel, where officers and crew are strictly separated, here you see men of all ranks working together, talking freely, even joking with their captain. The discipline is still there, the work still needs to be done, but it's the discipline of men who've chosen their fate rather than had it imposed upon them. As night falls and you settle into your new life, you begin to understand the true revolutionary nature of what you've joined. These aren't just criminals who've rejected society's laws. They're pioneers of a new kind of society, one based on consent of the governed, equal representation, and fair distribution of wealth. They've taken the worst job in the world, sailing, and transformed it into something approaching utopia, at least by the standards of their time. But tomorrow will bring new challenges and new revelations about this strange floating republic you've joined. You'll learn about the articles of agreement that govern every aspect of pirate life, the surprising systems they've developed for medical care and compensation, and the complex web of alliances and rivalries that connect pirate crews across the Caribbean. Most importantly, you'll begin to understand why this golden age of piracy was doomed from the start, and how the very success of these democratic experiments would eventually bring down the full wrath of the world's great empires upon their heads. The morning sun rises over your new floating world, and with it comes your first real glimpse of what pirate society actually looks like. As you emerge from the cramped quarters below deck, still adjusting to the gentle sway of your hammock and the constant symphony of creaking timbers, you notice something that immediately sets this ship apart from every merchant vessel you've ever known. There's no boatswain screaming orders at the crew, no officers strutting about with their whips and their threats. Instead, you see something almost impossible to believe. Sailors working together by choice, moving with the efficiency of men who understand that their survival depends on cooperation rather than fear. Your education in pirate democracy begins before you've even finished your morning ration of hardtack and grog. The Quartermaster, the same man who offered you this new life just yesterday, approaches with a worn piece of parchment in his hands. This document, he explains, is the foundation of everything you see around you. These are the ship's articles, the constitution of your floating republic. What strikes you immediately is that these aren't rules imposed from above by some distant authority. Every single line on this parchment was debated, argued over, and voted on by the entire crew. From the newest recruit to the captain himself, every man had an equal voice in creating the laws that would govern their lives. It's a concept so radical, so completely foreign to the world you've known, that it takes several readings before you fully grasp what you're looking at. The articles cover everything from the division of plunder to the punishment for various crimes, from the procedures for electing officers to the compensation for battle injuries. But more than just a list of rules, this document represents something extraordinary. a group of men who've rejected the arbitrary tyranny of their former lives and chosen to create a society based on consent and mutual agreement. As the Quartermaster reads through the key provisions, you begin to understand the genius of this system. The captain, far from being an absolute monarch like his counterpart on a merchant ship, serves at the pleasure of the crew. He can be removed from command by a simple majority vote if the men lose confidence in his leadership. His authority is absolute only during battle, when quick decisions can mean the difference between life and death. But in all other matters, he's just another voice in the democratic chorus. The Quartermaster, you learn, holds the real day-to-day power on the ship. Elected by the crew to represent their interests, he controls the distribution of food and water, settles disputes between crew members, and most importantly, oversees the division of all captured plunder. He's the people's advocate, the check on the captain's power, the guarantee that no single man can become a tyrant aboard this vessel. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the articles is the economic system they establish. Gone is the wage slavery of merchant service, where months of brutal labor might result in a handful of coins if you're lucky. In its place is a profit-sharing arrangement that would be considered progressive even by modern standards. Every man receives a predetermined share of whatever the ship captures, with shares allocated according to rank and responsibility, but never so unequally as to create the vast disparities you've known in the legitimate world. The captain might receive 2 shares to your 1, but that's a far cry from the merchant world, where officers live in luxury while common sailors subsist on scraps. The ship's specialists, the carpenter, the surgeon, the navigator, receive slightly larger portions in recognition of their crucial skills, but even they remain fundamentally equal members of the company rather than a separate officer class. What truly amazes you is the system of social insurance embedded in these articles. If you lose an arm in battle, you'll receive 600 pieces of 8 from the ship's treasury. A lost leg is worth 500, an eye 100. It's a crude system by later standards, but revolutionary for its time. No merchant captain would dream of compensating a sailor for injuries sustained in service. If you were hurt, you were simply abandoned at the next port to fend for yourself or die. Here, among these supposed criminals and outcasts, you found something that legitimate society doesn't offer. The promise that your brothers will take care of you if you're wounded in their service. It's a level of solidarity and mutual support that exists nowhere else in your world. The signing ceremony itself is unlike anything you've ever experienced. As you take the offered quill and make your mark on the parchment, you're not just joining a crew. You're becoming a citizen of a new kind of nation, one that exists only on the shifting deck of this wooden ship, but operates according to principles that the great philosophers of your age can only dream about. Your fellow new recruits go through the same ritual, each man solemnly adding his name to the growing list of signatures. Some can write their names in full, others make simple marks, but each signature carries exactly the same weight. In this moment, you're all equal shareholders in an enterprise that promises either great fortune or violent death, quite possibly both. With the formalities complete, you begin to explore your new home in earnest. The ship itself tells the story of this transformation from legitimate commerce to democratic piracy. Originally a merchant sloop, it's been modified for its new purpose with additional cannon ports cut into the hull and extra weapons stored on deck. But these changes go beyond mere armament. The rigid class distinctions that defined merchant ships have been literally torn down. The officers' quarters have been opened up to create more space for the common crew. The captain's private stores have been merged with the general provisions. Even the ship's cat, a crucial member of any vessel's crew for its ability to control rats, seems to move more freely between all levels of the ship's hierarchy. You notice that the work itself feels different here. The same tasks that felt like torture on the merchant vessel, adjusting sails, swabbing decks, maintaining rigging, now carry a different weight. You're not laboring to make some distant merchant richer while you receive barely enough to survive. Every hour of work you put in now directly benefits you and your chosen brothers. It's your ship now, and that changes everything about how you approach the endless tasks of seamanship. The food, while still the basic fare of sea life, is distributed more fairly. The captain doesn't dine on fresh meat and fine wine, while you gnaw weevil-infested hardtack. Everyone eats the same rations, and when the ship captures a prize with better provisions, everyone shares in the bounty. It's a small thing, but after years of watching officers feast while you went hungry, this equality of treatment feels almost miraculous. But your real education in pirate society begins when you witness your first crew meeting. Called to resolve a dispute between two sailors over a gambling debt, it's a fascinating glimpse into how democracy actually functions when there are no established institutions to fall back on. Every man has his say, arguments are made on both sides, and eventually a solution is reached by majority vote. The losing party accepts the decision without complaint, because he knows he helped make the rules that govern the process. This is governance in its purest form, unencumbered by tradition or inherited privilege. These men have created their own institutions from scratch, based on nothing more than their shared understanding of fairness and their mutual need to survive. It's messy, sometimes chaotic, but it works in a way that the rigid hierarchies of legitimate society never did for common sailors. As your first week aboard progresses, you begin to understand that you've joined something far more complex than a simple criminal enterprise. This is a society in miniature, complete with its own laws, customs, and culture. The songs the men sing, the stories they tell, the rituals they observe, all serve to bind this diverse group of individuals into a functioning community. The evening gatherings on deck become your window into this unique culture. Men share tales of previous voyages, debate the merits of different captains, and speculate about potential prizes on the horizon. There's a camaraderie here that you never experienced in the merchant service, where fear and mistrust poisoned every interaction between officers and crew. Yet underneath this fellowship, you sense the constant tension that defines pirate life. Every man aboard has made the same terrible choice you did, trading security for freedom, accepting the likelihood of a violent death in exchange for the chance to live as equals. It's a bargain that colors every conversation, every plan, every moment of apparent peace. The ship's routine reflects this precarious balance between order and chaos. Watch schedules must be maintained, the vessel kept seaworthy, and discipline preserved, but all within the framework of democratic consent. It's a delicate equilibrium that requires constant adjustment and compromise. Your introduction to this new world accelerates when the cry goes up from the crow's nest, "Sail ho!" In the distance, a merchant vessel plods across the horizon, heavy with cargo and ripe for the taking. This is the moment you've been anticipating with a mixture of excitement and terror. Your first taste of the pirate's trade is about to begin. The transformation that sweeps across the ship is instantaneous and electric. One moment you're listening to the gentle conversations of men at leisure, and the next you're witnessing the birth of a predator. The democratic discussions cease, the casual banter stops, and every soul aboard becomes focused on a single deadly purpose. Your captain, who just minutes ago was debating the merits of different knots with a common sailor, now assumes the absolute authority that the articles grant him in times of action. His voice carries across the deck with crisp precision as he issues orders that will determine whether you live to see another sunset or join the countless sailors who found their graves in these warm Caribbean waters. The crew moves with a practiced efficiency that speaks to months or years of working together under these exact circumstances. Men scramble up the rigging to adjust the sails for maximum speed, while others begin the careful process of preparing the ship's weapons. You watch in fascination as your new brothers transform from democratic citizens into instruments of maritime warfare. But what strikes you most forcefully is the absence of the terror you expected to feel. On the merchant vessel, the approach of any unknown ship meant potential disaster. helpless waiting, and the sick certainty that your fate was entirely in other men's hands. Here, you're not a victim waiting to be acted upon. You're part of the action, a shareholder in whatever outcome awaits. The Quartermaster appears beside you, noting your wide-eyed fascination with the proceedings. "First hunt?" he asks with a knowing smile. When you nod, he gestures toward the distant sail. "See how she sits low in the water? That's a good sign. Means she's heavy with cargo. And notice how slowly she's moving. That tells us her captain values his goods more than speed, which means he's probably not carrying enough men to put up much of a fight." As he speaks, you begin to understand that piracy isn't the chaotic free-for-all you'd imagined. This is a calculated business, requiring the same skills of observation and seamanship that legitimate sailors use, but applied to very different ends. Your captain is reading the wind, the currents, and the behavior of the target vessel with the expertise of a master mariner. The chase begins in earnest now, and you feel the ship respond beneath your feet as every sail is trimmed to perfection. The hull cuts through the waves with a speed and agility that your old merchant vessel could never have matched. This is what freedom looks like, you realize. Not just the political freedom of democratic governance, but the physical freedom of a ship built for pursuit rather than mere cargo hauling. Hours pass as the gap slowly closes between hunter and prey. During this time, you receive your first real education in the tactics of piracy. The experienced crew members explain how the approach must be managed, how to get close enough to prevent escape while avoiding the few small cannons that most merchant ships carry for defense. "The trick," explains an old salt named Murphy, his weathered hands working steadily on a length of rope, "is to look harmless until you're close enough that being harmless doesn't matter anymore. That's why we're flying English colors right now. To them, we're just another merchant vessel, maybe looking for news or company on these lonely seas. You watch as the deception unfolds with masterful precision. Your ship maintains a course that appears coincidental rather than predatory, gradually converging with the target as if by chance rather than design. The false flag snaps proudly in the breeze, proclaiming your vessel's loyalty to King George while concealing the democratic republic that actually governs its deck. The psychological aspects of this approach fascinate you. Everything depends on maintaining the illusion of normalcy until the moment of revelation. Your crew goes about their duties with studied casualness, giving no hint of the weapons hidden below deck or the grappling hooks coiled and ready for use. To any observer on the target vessel, you're just another group of honest sailors going about their lawful business. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, every man is calculating distances, wind directions, and angles of approach. The cannon crews are mentally rehearsing their drill. The boarding party is checking their weapons, and the ship's surgeon is quietly preparing his instruments for the wounded who may soon require his services. As the afternoon sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, the moment of truth approaches. You're now close enough to see individual figures moving about the deck of the merchant vessel, close enough to read the name painted on her stern. The Amsterdam merchant, bound for London with a cargo that could make every man aboard your ship wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. Your captain calls for the final approach, and the last act of the deception begins. The helmsman brings your ship onto a parallel course, close enough for conversation, but not so close as to cause immediate alarm. For several long minutes, the two vessels sail side by side, their crews exchanging the casual greetings common between ships at sea. Then your captain gives the signal you've been waiting for. The false English colours come down, and in their place rises the black flag that has become the universal symbol of piracy. But this isn't the cartoon skull and crossbones of popular imagination. It's a stark black banner that carries a message as clear as any written words. Surrender or die. The effect on the merchant crew is immediate and devastating. You watch through the ship's telescope as panic spreads across their deck like wildfire. Men run in all directions, some trying to prepare their few small cannons for action, others simply staring in horror at the fate that has overtaken them. Their captain can be seen shouting orders that his crew seems too stunned to follow. What happens next unfolds with the terrible inevitability of a natural disaster. Your ship's superior speed and maneuverability allow your captain to position the vessel for maximum advantage. The merchant ship, heavy with cargo and undermanned for combat, can neither flee nor fight effectively. Her captain's choices have been reduced to two: surrender immediately or face a battle he cannot possibly win. A warning shot from one of your cannons provides the final encouragement needed. The cannonball skips across the water just ahead of the merchant vessel's bow, a clear demonstration of your ship's firepower and your crew's competence in using it. The message is unmistakable. This is your one opportunity to yield gracefully. For a moment that seems to stretch into eternity, both ships continue their parallel course while the merchant captain weighs his impossible options. You can almost see the calculations running through his mind. His cargo is insured by wealthy men in London who will absorb the loss. His life is not. The choice, when viewed in those terms, becomes almost simple. The merchant vessel's colours come down in the universal signal of surrender. A cheer goes up from your crew, but it's a controlled celebration. The real work is just beginning. The capture of a ship is only the first step in a complex process that will determine whether this day ends in profit or disaster. Grappling hooks fly through the air, binding the two ships together with iron claws and thick rope. The boarding party, led by the Quartermaster, swarms across the gap between vessels with practiced efficiency. You follow, your heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration that you've never experienced before. The deck of the captured ship presents a scene of organized chaos. The merchant crew has been quickly disarmed and gathered amidships under guard, while your shipmates begin the systematic process of taking inventory. This isn't the wild looting you expected, but a methodical business operation conducted according to strict procedures. The Quartermaster takes charge of the proceedings with the authority granted him by the ship's articles. Every item of value must be catalogued and secured, from the obvious treasures in the captain's strongbox to the less glamorous but equally valuable naval stores in the ship's hold. Nothing can be overlooked, and nothing can be claimed by individual crew members until the official division takes place. You find yourself assigned to help search the cargo hold, and what you discover there exceeds your wildest expectations. Barrels of sugar and molasses, bales of tobacco, chests of indigo dye, and bolts of fine cloth fill the space from deck to overhead. This is the wealth of empires made manifest, the products of distant colonies bound for European markets, where they'll be sold at enormous profit. But the true treasure isn't gold or silver, though there's some of that too. The real prize is the cargo itself, goods that can be sold in any of the pirate-friendly ports scattered throughout the Caribbean. Each barrel, each bale, each chest represents a share of freedom for every man who risked his life to capture it. As the inventory continues, you begin to understand the economic reality that drives the pirate trade. This single capture represents more wealth than you could have earned in a lifetime of merchant service. Even after it's divided among the entire crew according to the articles, your share will be enough to live comfortably for months or even years. The captured crew presents a different kind of opportunity. Among the merchant sailors, your quartermaster identifies several skilled men who might be valuable additions to your company. A carpenter, a sailmaker, and a man who claims experience as a gunner are all offered the same choice you faced just days ago: continue with their present voyage or join the democratic brotherhood of the pirate ship. Two of them accept, drawn by the same desperate circumstances that brought you to this life. The others, whether from loyalty, fear, or simple preference for the familiar miseries they know, choose to remain with their captured vessel. Their decision is respected without argument or coercion. Pirates, having escaped forced service themselves, have no interest in compelling others to join their ranks. The entire process takes most of the remaining daylight. As the sun sets over the Caribbean, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The two ships finally separate. The merchant vessel, poorer by much of her cargo, but richer by the lives of her crew, continues on her interrupted voyage. Your ship, now laden with plunder and strengthened by new recruits, turns toward the nearest friendly port, where the captured goods can be converted into the hard currency that forms the lifeblood of pirate society. That night, as you sit on deck sharing a bottle of wine liberated from the merchant captain's private stores, you reflect on the extraordinary events of your first capture. In a single day, you've witnessed the complete transformation of desperate men into wealthy shareholders in a floating enterprise. You've seen democracy in action, efficient violence tempered by surprising mercy, and the birth of legends that will be told and retold in taverns across the Caribbean. But more than that, you've begun to understand the terrible mathematics that govern pirate life. Today brought wealth beyond imagining, but it also brought you one step closer to the inevitable reckoning that awaits every man who sails under the black flag. The same skills and daring that made today's capture possible have also marked you as an enemy of every legitimate government in the world. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new reminders of the price you've agreed to pay for this brief taste of freedom and equality. The captured goods must be sold, the profits divided, and the endless cycle of hunt and capture must begin again. Because in this world you've chosen, there is no retirement, no peaceful old age, no safety net beyond the brotherhood of men who've made the same desperate bargain with fate. The wine tastes sweet on your tongue, and the gold coins in your pocket represent more wealth than you've ever possessed. But beneath the celebration, you can already sense the shadow of the gallows that follows every pirate ship across these sunlit waters. This is the bargain you've struck. A short life, but a merry one, lived on your own terms, among men who've chosen freedom over security. As the stars emerge in the darkening sky, you realize that you're no longer the desperate merchant sailor who stepped aboard this ship just days ago. You've become something new, something dangerous, something that the civilized world will spend the next decade trying to destroy. You've become a pirate, and there's no going back. The morning after your first successful capture brings with it a sobering reality that no amount of stolen wine can wash away. As you wake in your hammock, the gentle sway of the ship reminds you that you're no longer just another anonymous sailor scraping by on merchant wages. You're now a wanted man, your name entered into the ledgers of colonial governors and naval commanders as an enemy of the crown. But first comes the business of converting your floating treasure into hard currency. Your ship makes way toward Port Royal, Jamaica, one of the notorious pirate havens where stolen goods can be transformed into Spanish pieces of 8 and English guineas. These ports exist in a grey area of colonial law, places where corrupt officials and unscrupulous merchants are willing to ask few questions about the origin of the goods they purchase. The approach to Port Royal reveals a city unlike anything you've ever seen. Built on a narrow spit of land jutting into Kingston Harbour, it's a ramshackle collection of taverns, brothels, warehouses, and gambling dens that cater to the needs of men who live fast and die young. The very air seems to vibrate with an energy born of easy money and easier violence. Your quartermaster takes charge of the negotiations with the local merchants, men whose fine clothes and soft hands cannot disguise the predatory gleam in their eyes. They know exactly what you are and where your cargo came from, but they also know that pirate gold spends as well as any other kind. The haggling is fierce but fair, conducted according to the unwritten rules that govern commerce in these lawless waters. While the officers handle the business of selling your plunder, you and the rest of the crew are free to explore this pirate's paradise. The transformation from the disciplined order of shipboard life to the chaotic freedom of shore leave is instantaneous and intoxicating. Men who've spent weeks following the strict routines of watch and duty now scatter like children released from school, eager to taste the pleasures that their dangerous profession has earned them. The taverns of Port Royal are unlike any drinking establishments you knew in your former life. Here, no sailor between gentleman and rogue. Pirates from a dozen different ship's mitts, comparing ink freely, sharing tales of their explode distinction is made between captain and common the generosity of various quartermasters, and debating the relative merits of different hunting grounds. You find yourself in the Bucket of Blood, a notorious establishment where the rum flows as freely as the stories and the dice never stop rolling. The proprietor, a one-eyed former pirate named Calico Tom, regales his customers with tales of the great Henry Morgan, while simultaneously keeping a sharp watch for any sign that his patrons might be getting too drunk or too violent for his establishment to handle. The gambling here operates on a scale that would have been unimaginable in your former life. Men casually wager more money in a single hand of cards than you used to earn in a year of honest labor. Fortunes are won and lost with the turn of a card or the roll of dice carved from whalebone and weighted with lead. The philosophy seems to be that money earned quickly should be spent quickly before death or the hangman's noose can claim both wealth and its owner. But the most striking aspect of pirate society ashore is the absolute equality that governs all interactions. A captain might command absolute obedience at sea, but in these taverns, he's just another customer buying rounds for his crew. The democratic principles that govern pirate ships extend naturally into their shore establishments, creating a rough but genuine egalitarianism that exists nowhere else in your world. You witness this equality in action when a dispute arises between two pirates from different crews over a gambling debt. Rather than escalating into violence, the matter is quickly resolved by an impromptu jury of their peers, men who've never met either party, but who understand the importance of maintaining the codes that keep their society functional. The verdict is accepted without argument, because everyone present recognizes that they all depend on the same system of rough justice. The women who frequent these establishments are as remarkable as the men who patronize them. Far from the helpless victims you might expect, many are formidable figures in their own right. Some are former pirates themselves. Women like Anne Bonny and Mary Red, who've proven that courage and cunning aren't exclusively male virtues. Others are shrewd businesswomen who've built small empires catering to the needs of men with more money than sense and less time than they'd like to believe. Your education in pirate economics continues as you watch the complex web of relationships that keeps this shadow economy functioning. Corrupt officials take their cut of every transaction, ensuring that naval patrols will be warned away from certain areas at certain times. Merchants provide not just markets for stolen goods, but also intelligence about shipping schedules and cargo manifests. Tavern keepers serve as informal banks, holding deposits for pirates between voyages and providing credit against future captures. It's a system that operates entirely outside the bounds of legitimate commerce, yet it functions with surprising efficiency. Trust, that most precious commodity in any criminal enterprise, is maintained through a combination of mutual benefit and the ever-present threat of violent retribution for those who break their word. In a world where legal contracts are meaningless, reputation becomes the only currency that truly matters. As the days pass in this intoxicating whirl of drinking, gambling, and spending, you begin to understand why so many pirates burn through their fortunes so quickly. The knowledge that death lurks around every corner creates an urgency to experience everything life has to offer while there's still time. Why save money for a future you'll probably never see when you can buy the finest clothes, the strongest rum, and the most beautiful companions that money can procure? Yet beneath the surface revelry, you sense the constant tension that defines pirate society. Every man in every tavern knows that their freedom depends on staying one step ahead of the naval patrols and colonial authorities who are slowly tightening the noose around the pirate havens. Conversations frequently turn to news from other ports, reports of increased naval activity, and rumors about which governors are offering pardons and which are offering bounties. The most sobering conversations involve the fate of captured pirates. Tales circulate of former comrades who've met their end at the gallows, their bodies left hanging in chains as warnings to others who might be tempted by the pirate life. These stories serve as constant reminders that the freedom you've purchased with your democratic articles and equal shares comes at a price that will eventually be collected. Your quartermaster finds you on your third day ashore, your pockets considerably lighter, but your spirits still high from the unprecedented luxury of eating fresh food and sleeping in a real bed. The expression on his weathered face tells you immediately that your shore leave is coming to an end. The cargo has been sold, the accounts have been settled, and it's time for the most important ritual in pirate society, the division of the plunder. The entire crew assembles in the common room of the Anchor and Chain, another of Port Royal's infamous taverns. The atmosphere is electric with anticipation as the quartermaster produces the ship's ledger and begins the formal accounting that will determine every man's share of the recent capture. This is democracy in its purest form, conducted in full view of every stakeholder with complete transparency about both the total proceeds and their distribution. The process begins with the ship's expenses, repairs to the hull, replacement of worn rigging, replenishment of the powder magazine, and provisions for the next voyage. These costs are deducted from the total before any individual shares are calculated, ensuring that the ship remains seaworthy and capable of future captures. It's a practical reminder that this democratic society depends entirely on maintaining the tools of its trade. Next comes the compensation fund, that revolutionary system of social insurance that sets pirate society apart from the legitimate world. 2 men were wounded in the recent capture, one with a sword cut to his arm that required stitching, another with a broken rib from a fall during the boarding action. Both receive their predetermined compensation before the general division begins, a visible demonstration that the Brotherhood takes care of its own. Only then does the quartermaster begin calling names for the general distribution. The captain receives his 2 shares, a substantial sum but hardly the overwhelming portion that a merchant captain might claim from his crew's labour. The quartermaster takes his share and a half, the carpenter and gunner their slightly enhanced portions, and then it's your turn. When your name is called, you step forward to receive your single full share of the plunder. The quartermaster counts out the coins into a leather pouch. Spanish pieces of 8, English guineas, French livres, and Dutch guilders, the mixed currency of international trade. The weight of the bag in your hands represents more wealth than you've ever possessed, more than your father earned in his entire lifetime as a village blacksmith. But more than the money itself, this moment represents something unprecedented in your experience. You're receiving the full value of your labour, calculated according to rules you helped create and distributed by a man you helped elect. No arbitrary deductions, no invented fines, no captain's whim reducing your hard-earned wages to a pittance. This is what it means to be free. The celebration that follows extends deep into the night and well into the next day. Men who've lived as equals aboard ship now have the means to live as kings ashore, at least temporarily. The finest restaurants in Port Royal see rough sailors dining on delicacies they've only heard described in stories. Tailors work around the clock to outfit pirates in silk shirts and velvet coats that would be appropriate for any gentleman's wardrobe. You yourself succumb to the intoxication of sudden wealth, purchasing a fine sword with an ivory handle, a brace of pistols crafted by the finest gunsmiths in London, and clothes that transform you from a ragged sailor into what could pass for a prosperous merchant. For a few days, you live the life of a wealthy man, free to indulge every appetite and desire that poverty had previously denied you. But this golden interlude cannot last forever. Your funds, substantial as they seemed, prove finite when applied to the expensive pleasures of Port Royal. Other crew members face the same mathematical reality, and one by one, they begin to appear at the ship. ready to resume the dangerous business of earning their next fortune. The Quartermaster's call to assemble comes just as your own purse reaches its final coins. The ship has been re-provisioned, the crew has had its fill of shore pleasures, and somewhere beyond the harbour, new prizes await capture. It's time to return to the sea, to the democratic cycle of hunt and capture that defines your dangers of pirate life, to the endless, chosen existence. As you climb aboard the familiar deck, now scrubbed clean and fitted with fresh supplies, you carry of what with you? The memory it feels like to live without want, without fear, without the crushing weight of arbitrary authority. But you also carry the knowledge that this freedom comes at a price that grows higher with each passing day. The ship that sails out of Port Royal Harbour carries more than just a crew of pirates. It carries a floating experiment in democracy, a radical challenge to the established order, and a group of men who've chosen to live as free equals in a world that offers common sailors nothing but slavery and exploitation. You've tasted both the rewards and the costs of this choice, and you've found the bargain acceptable. But as the familiar coastline of Jamaica fades behind you, and the endless blue of the Caribbean opens ahead, you cannot shake the feeling that changes are coming. The very success of pirate society has begun to attract the attention of the great powers whose shipping you prey upon. The Royal Navy is commissioning new ships specifically designed to hunt pirates, and colonial governors are offering increasingly substantial rewards for the capture of pirate crews. Your floating republic sails into an uncertain future, carrying with it the dreams and fears of men who've dared to imagine a different way of living. The golden age that made your transformation from desperate sailor to free citizen possible may be nearing its end, but for now the wind fills your sails, and the horizon beckons with the promise of new adventures. The sea that stretches endlessly before you holds both fortune and doom in its depths, and you've chosen to embrace both possibilities in exchange for the one thing that legitimate society could never offer you: the chance to live and die as a free man among equals. Whatever comes next, you'll face it with the brotherhood of men who've made the same impossible choice, sailing under the black flag toward whatever fate awaits those bold enough to challenge the world itself. The months that follow your return to the hunting grounds reveal the true rhythm of pirate life, a cycle as predictable as the tides, yet as unpredictable as the weather itself. Days stretch into weeks of empty horizons, broken only by the occasional merchant sail that proves either too fast to catch or too well armed to risk attacking. These periods of enforced idleness test the democratic bonds that hold your floating society together more severely than any battle ever could. You discover that boredom is the pirate's greatest enemy, more dangerous than any naval frigate or colonial militia. When men accustomed to action and profit find themselves trapped on a small wooden platform with nothing to do but stare at empty water, tensions begin to build like pressure in a cannon barrel. Arguments break out over card games, old grievances resurface during the long night watches, and the democratic process that seemed so elegant during successful times becomes strained and fractious. The Quartermaster earns his enhanced share during these difficult periods, constantly mediating disputes and finding ways to keep the crew occupied. Work details are organized not just for the ship's maintenance, but for the crew's sanity. Men are set to scraping rust from cannon barrels that were cleaned just days before, or tasked with repairing sails that show no signs of wear. It's make work, and everyone knows it, but it serves the vital function of channeling restless energy into productive activity. Your education in the subtleties of pirate society continues as you observe how different men handle these periods of scarcity. Some, the veterans who've survived multiple lean seasons, retreat into themselves, conserving their energy like hibernating animals. They sleep more, speak less, and seem to enter a state of suspended animation that allows them to endure weeks of monotony without losing their sanity. Others, particularly the newer recruits like yourself, struggle with the psychological weight of endless waiting. The excitement that carried you through your first capture begins to fade, replaced by a gnawing anxiety about when the next prize might appear. You find yourself calculating and recalculating your remaining funds from the Port Royal division, wondering how long they might last if no new captures materialize. The ship's cook becomes a figure of crucial importance during these barren periods. Working with the limited ingredients available at sea, he performs minor miracles of creativity that help maintain morale. A successful fishing expedition yields fresh meat that's distributed with ceremonial fairness. When a barrel of flour yields enough for fresh bread, the aroma alone seems to lift the spirits of men who've grown weary of hardtack and salt pork. Music takes on an almost religious significance during these times. The ship's fiddler, whose skills seemed merely pleasant during periods of plenty, becomes essential to the crew's psychological survival. His evening performances on deck aren't just entertainment, but communal rituals that bind the men together and remind them of their shared identity as something more than common criminals. The songs themselves tell the story of your chosen world. Ballads about famous pirates serve as both inspiration and warning, reminding you of the glorious deeds that made certain captains legendary, while also noting their eventual fates at the end of Spanish swords or English ropes. Work songs help coordinate the endless tasks of seamanship, while building the rhythmic unity that transforms individual sailors into a single, efficient organism. During one particularly long stretch without prizes, you witness the democratic process under maximum strain. A crew member named Peters, driven to desperation by weeks of empty seas and dwindling personal funds, proposes attacking a small fishing village on the coast of Cuba. His argument is passionate and practical. They need supplies, they need money, and they need action to prevent the crew from losing its edge. The debate that follows reveals the complexity of pirate ethics in ways that no simple articles of agreement could anticipate. Peters has supporters who argue that their democratic society gives them the right to pursue any course of action approved by majority vote. If the crew decides to raid the village, then that decision carries the same legitimacy as any other collective choice they've made. But opposition emerges from unexpected quarters. Old Tom Hartwell, a grizzled veteran of Morgan's campaigns, stands to argue against the proposal with surprising eloquence. Pirates, he maintains, prey upon merchant shipping because those ships carry cargo that belongs to distant investors and trading companies. The goods are insured, the losses can be absorbed, and the moral weight of the crime falls primarily on those wealthy enough to bear it. A fishing village presents an entirely different moral calculation. The people there are poor, their boats represent their only means of survival, and attacking them would make the pirates no better than the Spanish raiders who once terrorized these same coasts. It would be a violation of the unwritten code that separates piracy from simple banditry, transforming the crew from maritime republicans into common thugs. The debate continues for hours, with men who usually agree finding themselves on opposite sides of a question that cuts to the heart of what they've chosen to become. Democracy, you realize, doesn't always produce clear answers or comfortable decisions. Sometimes it merely provides a framework for wrestling with impossible choices that have no perfect solutions. When the vote finally comes, the proposal fails by a narrow margin. Peters accepts the decision with visible reluctance, but he accepts it nonetheless. The democratic process has held, even under extreme pressure, but you can see that the strain has cost something in terms of crew unity and morale. The resolution comes 3 days later when a lookout spots the distinctive silhouette of a Spanish treasure galleon on the distant horizon. The ship appears to be sailing alone, separated from whatever convoy might have been protecting it, and riding low in the water in a way that suggests a valuable cargo. The transformation that sweeps across your vessel is immediate and electric. Men who'd been sullen and listless suddenly burst into purposeful activity. But this prize presents challenges unlike anything you've faced before. Spanish galleons aren't the lightly defended merchant vessels you've grown accustomed to capturing. They carry substantial armaments, experienced crews, and often a contingent of Spanish Marines trained specifically for combat at sea. The potential rewards are enormous, but so are the risks. Your captain calls for a crew meeting to discuss whether to attempt the capture. This isn't a decision he can make unilaterally, even in his role as war chief. The Articles of Agreement require crew approval for any action that places the ship in exceptional danger, and attacking a Spanish galleon certainly qualifies. The debate reveals the full complexity of democratic decision-making under pressure. Some crew members argue that the potential rewards justify any risk, pointing out that a single successful capture of a treasure ship could make every man aboard wealthy enough to retire from piracy entirely. Others contend that the odds are too poor, the danger too great, and the likelihood of catastrophic defeat too high to justify the attempt. Mathematical calculations are attempted, with men trying to weigh the probable value of the galleon's cargo against the statistical likelihood of successful capture. But these discussions quickly break down into arguments about courage, greed, and the true nature of the pirate calling. Are you bold adventurers willing to risk everything for the ultimate prize, or are you cautious businessmen who should stick to safer, more predictable targets? The arguments continue as your ship shadows the galleon at a safe distance, maintaining visual contact while the crew wrestles with their momentous decision. You find yourself torn between the same conflicting impulses that divide your shipmates. The promise of extraordinary wealth appeals to something deep in your nature, but the possibility of violent death in a hopeless battle terrifies you in ways that smaller engagements never did. As the afternoon sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, the debate takes an unexpected turn. Murphy, the old salt who'd helped educate you during your first capture, stands to address the assembly with the authority that comes from years of surviving in these dangerous waters. His words carry weight because everyone knows he's seen more battles and lived through more close calls than any other man aboard. "Lads," he begins, his weathered face serious in the golden light, "I've sailed with Morgan, I've fought the Spanish from Cartagena to Campeche, and I've seen more good men die for treasure than I care to remember. That galleon out there isn't just a prize, it's a test of whether we're still the men who signed those articles, or whether we've become something else entirely." His speech transforms the debate from a simple question of risk and reward into an examination of the crew's fundamental identity. Are they still the democratic brotherhood of equals who chose freedom over security, or have they become a collection of individuals motivated only by personal greed? The distinction matters because it will determine not just whether they attack the galleon, but what kind of men they'll be, regardless of the outcome. When the vote finally comes, it's closer than anyone expected. The decision to attack passes by just 3 votes, a margin narrow enough that every man who opposed it must now commit himself to supporting an action he believes is foolhardy. This is the price of democratic participation. Sometimes you must risk your life for decisions you disagree with, because the alternative is the collapse of the system that gave you a voice in the first place. The preparation for battle reveals aspects of pirate society that you've never seen before. The ship's articles contain detailed provisions for the distribution of any plunder taken from Spanish vessels, reflecting the special hatred that English-speaking pirates bear for their Catholic enemies. But they also contain provisions for the care of wounded and the compensation of widows, grimmer acknowledgements of the likely cost of the coming fight. The ship's surgeon emerges from below decks with his leather satchel of instruments, setting up his makeshift operating theatre on the gun deck, where the wounded will be brought during the battle. His preparations are methodical and grim: sharp knives for cutting away damaged flesh, silk thread for stitching wounds, and a leather strap for patients to bite down on during amputations. The bottles of rum he arranges aren't for celebration but for anesthesia, the only painkiller available in your floating world. Gun crews drill with renewed intensity, practicing the complex ballet of loading, aiming, and firing the ship's cannons with maximum speed and accuracy. Every man knows that the Spanish gunners they'll face are professionals trained from childhood in the art of naval warfare. The only advantage your crew possesses is the desperation of men who've chosen to risk everything on a single throw of the dice. The boarding party receives special attention, with the Quartermaster personally inspecting every cutlass and pistol that will be carried into close combat. These weapons must function perfectly when lives depend on them, and any blade that shows signs of rust or any firearm with a questionable lock is immediately replaced from the ship's armory. In the cramped quarters of a ship's deck, a weapon malfunction means death, not just for the man carrying it, but for his brothers fighting beside him. As night falls, your ship begins its final approach to the Galleon. The Spanish vessel shows no signs of having detected your presence. Her crew apparently confident in their ship's reputation and firepower. This overconfidence may be your only advantage, the brief moment of surprise that might allow you to close the distance before the enemy can organize an effective defense. The stars emerge in the darkening sky as your ship glides silently through the calm Caribbean waters. Every man aboard knows that by tomorrow's sunset, many of them will be dead. The mathematical certainty of casualties in naval combat makes this knowledge inescapable. Yet none of them attempts to withdraw from the coming battle, because they understand that their democratic society depends on every man fulfilling his obligations, regardless of personal fear. You check your weapons one final time, feeling the familiar weight of your cutlass and the cold metal of your pistols. The Spanish pieces of 8 from your last prize jingle softly in your pocket, a reminder of what you've already gained from this dangerous life and what you might lose in the coming hours. But more than personal wealth, you're risking the future of the democratic experiment that transformed you from an exploited sailor into a free citizen. The Galleon looms larger in the darkness ahead, her imposing bulk outlined against the star-filled sky. Soon, very soon, you'll discover whether the principles of equality and brotherhood that govern your floating republic are strong enough to overcome the professional military power of the Spanish Empire. The test that Murphy spoke of is about to begin, and its outcome will determine not just your personal fate, but the future of piracy itself in these contested waters. The night air carries the sound of waves against wooden hulls, the creak of rigging, and the whispered prayers of men preparing to face death in the name of freedom. Tomorrow will bring either glorious victory or catastrophic defeat, but tonight belongs to the quiet contemplation of men who've chosen to live and die by their own rules in a world that offers them no other choice. Your democratic brotherhood sails through the darkness toward its greatest challenge, carrying with it the hopes and fears of everyone who's ever dreamed of a life lived free from the arbitrary power of kings and captains. The Spanish galleon waits unknowing in the distance, soon to become either your greatest prize or your final resting place beneath the warm waters of the Caribbean Sea. The dawn light creeps across the Caribbean waters like spilled gold, painting the Spanish galleon in hues that make her seem almost beautiful rather than the instrument of potential doom she represents. Your ship has spent the night positioning itself for the perfect approach, using the darkness and the prevailing winds to gain every possible advantage before the inevitable moment of contact. As the sun climbs higher, details of your target become devastatingly clear through the ship's telescope. The San Miguel is no ordinary merchant vessel, but a true war galleon, her sides bristling with cannon ports and her decks crowded with more men than your crew has ever faced in a single engagement. The Spanish flag snaps proudly from her mainmast, a crimson and gold banner that represents centuries of imperial power and military tradition. Your captain studies the enemy vessel with the calculating eye of a master chess player, noting wind direction, sea conditions, and the subtle signs that reveal the galleon's readiness for battle. The Spanish crew appears alert but not alarmed, suggesting they haven't yet identified your ship as a threat. This precious advantage of surprise represents perhaps your only hope of surviving the coming encounter with your democratic ideals intact. The final crew meeting before battle carries a weight unlike any you've experienced. Men who voted together on everything from the division of plunder to the punishment of minor infractions now face a decision that could end their democratic experiment forever. The Quartermaster's voice is steady as he outlines the plan of attack, but you can hear the underlying tension that grips every soul aboard. The strategy depends on speed, surprise, and the kind of coordinated action that only emerges from months of working together as equals. Your ship will approach from the Galleon's blind spot, using the morning sun to mask your approach until the last possible moment. Once within range, you'll attempt to disable her steering with chain shot before closing for the boarding action that will determine the outcome. It's a plan that requires perfect timing and flawless execution from every man aboard. In the democratic tradition that governs all major decisions, the Quartermaster calls for any objections or suggested modifications. The silence that greets his request speaks volumes about the crew's understanding of what lies ahead. This isn't the time for debate or democratic refinement. This is the moment when all your collective choices converge into a single point of action. The transformation of your ship from peaceful merchant vessel to instrument of war unfolds with practiced efficiency. False bulkheads are torn away to reveal additional cannon ports, their black muzzles emerging like the eyes of some great predator. Nets are rigged above the deck to catch falling rigging and protect the crew from the deadly rain of wooden splinters that naval combat invariably produces. Sand is scattered across the deck to provide footing when blood makes the planks slippery. Your role in the coming battle has been assigned based on your developing skills and the crew's assessment of where you'll be most valuable. You'll serve with one of the gun crews, helping to load and aim the cannons that represent your ship's primary offensive capability. It's dangerous work that places you in direct line of the enemy's return fire, but it's also crucial to the democratic principle that every man contributes according to his abilities. The gun you're assigned to is a 12-pounder, a cannon capable of hurling a solid iron ball with enough force to punch through the oak planking of any ship afloat. Your crew chief is a grizzled veteran named Santos, who served on pirate ships since the days of Henry Morgan. His knowledge of gunnery has been earned through decades of naval combat, and his survival this long speaks to both his skill and his luck. Santos explains the brutal mathematics of naval warfare as your ship begins its final approach. Each cannon shot represents a complex calculation involving powder charges, elevation, wind speed, and the rolling motion of both ships. Miss by inches, and your shot harmlessly splashes into the sea. Hit your target, and you might kill a dozen men with a single ball. The difference between victory and defeat often comes down to which side can perform these calculations faster and more accurately under the stress of battle. The Spanish galleon grows larger with each passing minute, her details becoming sharp enough to see individual sailors moving about her deck. Some are pointing in your direction now, their shouts carrying across the water as they begin to realize that the innocent-looking sloop approaching them might not be as harmless as it appears. The moment of surprise is slipping away, but you're close enough now that it may not matter. Your captain gives the order to run up the battle colours, and the black flag of piracy unfurls from your mainmast like a declaration of war against the established order of the world. The effect on the Spanish crew is immediate and electric. Men run in all directions across the galleon's deck, some rushing to the guns while others climb into the rigging to adjust the sails for maximum maneuverability. Their captain can be seen through the telescope, a figure in elaborate uniform, shouting orders that his crew scrambles to obey. The Spanish response reveals both the strengths and weaknesses of professional naval discipline. Their crew moves with the practiced efficiency of men trained to follow orders without question. But they also show the rigid thinking that comes from years of fighting by the book. They're preparing to engage you as they would any other enemy warship, with formal broadsides and traditional tactics that your democratic crew is under no obligation to follow. Santos grins as he watches the enemy preparations, his weathered face creased with the satisfaction of a man who's seen this dance many times before. The Spanish expect you to sail alongside them and trade broadsides like gentlemen. giving both sides an equal chance to demonstrate their courage and gunnery skills. Instead, you're going to do something that no respectable naval officer would consider. You're going to cheat. The plan unfolds with the precision of a clockwork mechanism. Your ship approaches the Galleon from an angle that minimizes your exposure to her guns, while maximizing your ability to rake her deck with devastating fire. It's an ungentlemanly tactic that violates every principle of honorable naval combat. But honor is a luxury that democratic pirates can't afford when facing the military might of Imperial Spain. The Spanish captain realizes his mistake too late. His ship, designed for formal fleet actions against similarly massive opponents, lacks the maneuverability to counter your unconventional approach. His gunners, trained to fight according to established naval doctrine, find themselves unable to bring their weapons to bear effectively against a target that refuses to cooperate with their expectations. Your captain waits until the perfect moment, when the angle of approach can combine to give your guns the maximum possible the rolling of the sea advantage. His command to fire echoes across the water with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. The world explodes in smoke, flame, and the thunder simultaneously. The effect of your browous roar of a dozen cannons speaking side on the Spanish galleon is devastating and immediate. Your chain shot, design's ability to maneuver, tears through the galleon's sails like invisible to destroy rigging and disable the enemy's scythes. Her mainmast cracks with a sound like thunder, slowly toppling forward to crash across her deck in a tangle of canvas, rope, and splintered wood. Men scream in pain and terror as the massive timber pins them beneath its weight. But the Spanish aren't finished. Their return fire, while poorly aimed due to their ship's sudden loss of maneuverability, still carries the weight of professional gunnery training. Cannonballs whistle overhead, and one crashes through your ship's railing just yards from where you stand. The splinters of shattered wood fly through the air like daggers, and you feel one slice across your cheek, drawing blood that tastes of salt and fear. Santos shouts orders that cut through the chaos, directing your gun crew through combat conditions. Powder charges must be measure the complex process of reloading undid precisely despite the rolling deck and the acrid smoke the right force, and the touch hole non-ball must be rammed home with exactly that burns your eyes and throat. The heavy can powder that must be primed with find explode prematurely if handled carelessly. The second broadside follows within minutes, a testament to the drilling and practice that your democratic crew has undergone during the long months at sea. This time your target is the galleon's hull, aiming for the waterline where a well-placed shot might open seams that would flood the enemy's lower decks. The mathematics of naval warfare are simple. Sink the enemy ship, and the battle is over, regardless of how many guns they carry or how brave their crew might be. Your shots find their mark with accuracy that would impress any naval gunnery instructor. The galleon's side erupts in clouds of splinters as iron balls punch through oak planking that's inches thick. You can hear the screams of wounded men carried across the water, a sound that mingles horror with the satisfaction of knowing that each enemy casualty brings your democratic brotherhood one step closer to survival. The Spanish response grows more desperate as their situation deteriorates. Their remaining guns fire in ragged volleys, the careful discipline of professional gunnery breaking down under the pressure of unexpected tactics and mounting casualties. Some shots go wide, splashing harmlessly into the sea. Others fly overhead, cutting through your rigging, but causing no serious damage to your ship's fighting capability. But one Spanish ball finds its target with devastating effect. It crashes through the side of your ship just below the waterline, sending a shower of splinters across the gun deck and opening a hole that immediately begins taking on water. The sound is unmistakable, the rushing gurgle of the sea claiming what belongs to it. Your ship is wounded, perhaps mortally, and the battle suddenly takes on a new urgency. The Quartermaster appears at your gun position, his face grim as he assesses the damage. The hole can be plugged temporarily, but your ship is taking on water faster than the pumps can expel it. You have perhaps an hour before the rising water in the hold makes further fighting impossible. The battle must be decided quickly, or your democratic experiment will end beneath the warm waters of the Caribbean. This news transforms the engagement from a calculated assault into a desperate race against time. Your captain orders the final phase of the attack, the boarding action that will determine whether your wounded ship limps away victorious or joins the countless vessels that rest on the ocean floor. Grappling hooks are prepared, cutlasses are sharpened one final time, and men check their pistols with the careful attention of soldiers who know their lives depend on their weapons functioning perfectly. The approach to boarding distance requires your ship to brave the most dangerous fire the Spanish can bring to bear. As you close the gap between vessels, every gun the Galleon can still fire is trained on your approaching hull. The air fills with the whine of cannonballs and the crash of impact as shot after shot slams into your ship's sides. Men fall around you, some killed instantly by direct hits, others wounded by the deadly shower of splinters that each impact creates. Santos takes a musket ball through his shoulder, the blood spreading across his shirt as he staggers but continues directing the gun crew. His wound is serious but not immediately fatal, and he refuses to leave his position until the last cannon shot has been fired. This is the brotherhood that democracy has created. Men willing to die for principles they helped create, and shipmates they helped choose. The final moments before boarding are a chaos of smoke, blood, and desperate preparation. Grappling hooks fly through the air, their iron claws biting deep into the galleon's railing and binding the two ships together in an embrace that only death can break. The Spanish crew prepares to repel boarders, their remaining officers rallying men who've already endured more punishment than most soldiers see in entire campaigns. Your ship's gun crews fire one last broadside at point-blank range, the muzzles of your cannons almost touching the enemy's hull. The effect is catastrophic, opening massive holes in the galleon's side and sweeping her deck clear of anyone brave or foolish enough to remain in the open. The smell of gunpowder mingles with the scent of blood and splintered wood, creating an atmosphere that seems to belong more to hell than to any earthly battlefield. Then comes the moment that every man has been preparing for since the battle began. The Quartermaster raises his cutlass and shouts the words that transform individual sailors into a single instrument of democratic will. With a roar that seems to rise from the depths of their collective soul, your crew swarms across the gap between ships, pistols in one hand and steel in the other. The deck of the Spanish galleon becomes a scene of hand-to-hand combat that would challenge the imagination of any storyteller. Men fight with the desperation of cornered animals, knowing that defeat means death not just for themselves, but for the democratic ideals they represent. Spanish Marines, trained from childhood in the arts of war, meet English pirates who've learned their fighting skills in the harsh school of survival at sea. Your own role in the boarding action unfolds with a clarity that seems impossible given the chaos surrounding you. Time slows as adrenaline sharpens your senses to a degree you've never experienced. You can see individual sword strokes with perfect clarity, hear the distinct sound each blade makes as it cuts through air or bites into flesh. Feel the deck vibrate beneath your feet as men struggle for their lives just yards away. The Spanish captain, resplendent in his gold-braided uniform, makes a final stand near his ship's wheel with a handful of loyal officers. These men represent everything your democratic brotherhood has rejected, the inherited privilege and unearned authority that keeps common sailors in bondage. The fight that develops around this last pocket of resistance takes on symbolic importance that transcends the immediate tactical situation. Your Quartermaster leads the final assault, his cutlass flashing in the morning sun as he cuts through the Spanish defense with the skill of a man who's survived dozens of such encounters. Behind him surge the representatives of your floating democracy, men who've chosen their leaders and their fate through collective decision rather than royal appointment or accident of birth. The Spanish captain's surrender, when it finally comes, marks more than the end of a single battle. It represents the triumph of democratic principles over imperial authority. the victory of chosen brotherhood over inherited hierarchy. As the Spanish colors come down and are replaced by your black flag of freedom, you realize that you've participated in something far more significant than a simple act of piracy. The Galleon's hold reveals treasures that exceed even your most optimistic expectations. Chests of silver pieces of 8, ingots of gold from the mines of Peru, precious gems that sparkle like captured starlight in the dim light below decks. But more valuable than any material wealth is the knowledge that your democratic society has proven itself capable of defeating the professional military forces of the world's greatest empire. As your wounded ship limps toward the nearest friendly port with its captured prize in tow, you begin to understand that this victory may be both the highest achievement and the beginning of the end for pirate democracy. Success on this scale cannot go unnoticed by the authorities whose shipping you've attacked and whose military forces you've defeated. The very magnitude of your triumph ensures that a response will come, swift and merciless. The Spanish Empire will not tolerate the loss of a treasure galleon to a crew of democratic pirates. The Royal Navy will not ignore the threat that your floating republic represents to the established order of maritime commerce. Colonial governors will not overlook the example that your success sets for other desperate sailors considering the pirate life. But for now, as the sun sets over the Caribbean and your ships sail towards safety, you're part of a democratic brotherhood that has achieved the impossible. You've taken the worst job in the world and transformed it into something approaching paradise, at least by the standards of men who had no other choices available to them. You've proven that ordinary sailors, given the chance to govern themselves, can outfight and outthink the professional forces of imperial power. The price of this success will be paid later, when the full weight of civilized authority turns its attention to destroying your floating democracy. But the principles you fought for, the equality you've achieved, and the brotherhood you've forged will survive even the destruction that's surely coming. Future generations will remember not just your crimes, but your courage. Not just your violence, but your vision of what life could be like when common people choose their own destiny. Tonight, as you tend your wounds and count your shares of the captured treasure, you're living proof that democracy works even in the most unlikely circumstances. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and new threats to everything you've built together, but you'll face them as free men, equal citizens of a republic that exists nowhere but on the rolling deck of a pirate ship, and that may be enough to make all the sacrifices worthwhile. The captured galleon sails beside you through the gathering darkness, her hold full of Spanish gold that will soon be divided according to the democratic articles you've sworn to uphold. It's a sight that would have seemed impossible just months ago, when you were nothing more than an exploited sailor on a merchant vessel, dreaming of freedom, but seeing no path toward achieving it. Now you know that such paths exist for those brave enough to walk them, even if they lead through dangers that would terrify more cautious souls. Your floating democracy has survived its greatest test, but greater challenges await as the civilized world awakens to the threat that free men pose to established authority everywhere. The weeks following your greatest triumph bring revelations that fundamentally alter your understanding of the world you've chosen to inhabit. As news of the galleon's capture spreads through the network of pirate havens and corrupt colonial ports, you begin to see how your floating democracy fits into a larger tapestry of rebellion and resistance that spans the entire Caribbean. Port Royal buzzes with excitement as your ships arrive, their holds heavy with Spanish treasure, and their crews alive with the confidence of men who've proven themselves against impossible odds. But the celebration carries an undercurrent of unease that you're only beginning to understand. Other captains, veterans of decades at sea, speak in hushed tones about the consequences of such spectacular success. The taverns fill with stories and speculation. Some crews speak of Spanish naval squadrons already being assembled in Havana and Cartagena, warships specifically tasked with hunting down the pirates who dared attack a treasure galleon. Others whisper about English naval officers who've been recalled from peaceful postings to take command of pirate hunting expeditions. The very success that made you wealthy has also painted a target on every pirate ship in the Caribbean. Your quartermaster, ever the pragmatist, uses these shore leave days to establish new contacts and gather intelligence about the changing political landscape. He meets with merchants who deal in stolen goods, corrupt officials who provide warnings about naval patrols, and other quartermasters who share information about safe harbors and dangerous waters. These conversations reveal a shadow economy of staggering complexity, one that your democratic brotherhood has become an increasingly important part of. The division of the Galleon's plunder becomes a ceremony that attracts observers from across the pirate community. Other crews gather to witness how your democratic articles handle such unprecedented wealth, curious to see whether the principles of equality and fair distribution can survive the temptation of truly extraordinary treasure. The process unfolds with the same methodical transparency that governed smaller prizes, but the stakes are now high enough to test every man's commitment to collective ideals. When your turn comes to receive your share, the weight of gold and silver coins in your hands represents more than personal wealth. Each piece of 8 carries the promise that ordinary men can achieve extraordinary things when they work together as equals. The Spanish Empire minted these coins to finance its global dominance, never imagining they would end up rewarding the democratic ideals that challenge imperial authority itself. But wealth on this scale creates problems that your articles never anticipated. Men who struggled with the temptations of modest success now face the corrupting influence of genuine fortune. Some crew members speak openly of retiring from piracy, using their shares to purchase land in distant colonies where their past won't follow them. Others propose increasingly ambitious raids, convinced that lightning can strike twice if they're bold enough to court it again. The democratic process strains under these new pressures. Debates that once focused on practical matters of seamanship and survival now revolve around philosophical questions about the nature of your society and its future. Are you temporary outlaws seeking enough wealth to rejoin legitimate society, or are you permanent revolutionaries committed to maintaining your floating democracy regardless of the cost? These discussions take on urgency as reports filter in about the authorities' response to your success. Colonial governors who once ignored piracy as a minor nuisance now view it as a direct threat to imperial authority. Naval squadrons that were scattered across distant oceans are being concentrated in the Caribbean with orders to end the pirate threat once and for all. The Golden Age that made your transformation possible is entering its final phase. Your captain, sensing the changing winds, calls for a crew meeting that will determine your collective response to these gathering threats. The choice before you is stark. Retreat to the margins and hope to avoid the storm that's coming, or double down on the democratic principles that brought you this far and face whatever consequences follow. It's a decision that will define not just your personal future, but the legacy of pirate democracy itself. The debate reveals fault lines within your brotherhood that success has temporarily papered over, but not eliminated. Older crew members, veterans of previous crackdowns on piracy, argue for caution and strategic withdrawal. They've seen what happens when imperial powers focus their full attention on eliminating maritime threats. And they know that individual crews, no matter how successful or well organized, cannot long survive such concentrated opposition. Younger pirates, intoxicated by recent victories and flush with Spanish gold, push for continued aggression. They argue that retreat will only encourage further pressure from the authorities, while continued success might force the empires to negotiate rather than fight. Their confidence stems from the democratic bonds that held your crew together during the Galleon battle, proof that freely chosen cooperation can overcome hierarchical discipline when the stakes are high enough. You find yourself torn between these competing visions, understanding the wisdom in both positions while fully committed to neither. The practical sailor in you recognizes the mathematical impossibility of fighting the combined navies of Europe with wooden ships and democratic ideals. But the free man in you rebels against the idea of surrendering the equality and dignity you fought so hard to achieve. The resolution comes through a compromise that reflects the democratic sophistication your society has developed over months of collective decision-making. Rather than choosing between continued aggression and strategic retreat, the crew votes to pursue a middle course that acknowledges both the opportunities and the dangers of your current situation. You'll continue hunting prizes, but with greater selectivity and enhanced caution. You'll maintain your democratic principles, but with better security and more careful planning. This decision requires practical changes to your operational methods. Intelligence gathering becomes more important than ever, with crew members assigned to cultivate contacts in merchant houses and naval offices who can provide advance warning of patrol schedules and convoy routes. The ship itself undergoes modifications designed to enhance its speed and stealth, sacrificing some firepower for the ability to avoid fights rather than win them. Your role in this evolution reflects your growing experience and proven competence. No longer the desperate recruit who joined out of simple necessity, you've become a valued member of the democratic community with specific skills and responsibilities. The Quartermaster assigns you to help train newer recruits, passing on the lessons you've learned about everything from gunnery to the subtle arts of reading weather and sea conditions. These teaching responsibilities provide unexpected insights into the nature of pirate society. The men who join your crew now come from increasingly diverse backgrounds, reflecting the growing reputation of pirate democracy as an alternative to the exploitation and brutality of legitimate maritime service. Former naval sailors bring professional training, but must learn to think independently rather than simply follow orders. Escaped indentured servants contribute desperate energy, but need education in the technical skills of seamanship. Each new recruit requires careful integration into the democratic culture that defines your floating society. They must learn not just the practical skills of piracy, but the philosophical principles that separate your brotherhood from common criminals. The Articles of Agreement become both constitution and catechism, a document that new members study and debate until they fully understand the rights and responsibilities of democratic citizenship. The diversity of your crew creates its own challenges and opportunities. Men from different nations bring different languages, customs, and expectations about how society should function. Religious differences occasionally surface, with Catholic sailors from Spanish territories mixing uneasily with Protestant English and Dutch pirates. These tensions require constant management through the democratic processes that have become second nature to your original crew. But diversity also strengthens your society in unexpected ways. Spanish-speaking crew members provide invaluable intelligence about enemy ship movements and colonial defences. Former naval sailors contribute professional knowledge about tactics and navigation that enhances your operational effectiveness. Men with different cultural backgrounds suggest new approaches to old problems, preventing the kind of rigid thinking that can doom any organisation facing changing circumstances. Your ship becomes a floating laboratory for democratic governance, testing whether the principles of equality and collective decision-making can survive the pressures of cultural diversity, external threats, and the internal success. The experiments aren't always successful, and some decisions reached through democratic processes prove costly or dangerous. But the alternative, returning to the hierarchical authoritarianism of legitimate society, seems increasingly unthinkable to men who've tasted genuine freedom. The changing nature of your targets reflects both your enhanced capabilities and the evolving security environment. Small merchant vessels, once your primary prey, now often travel in armed convoys that make attack too dangerous to justify. Spanish treasure ships sail with naval escorts that turn every engagement into a potential battle for survival. Even Portuguese slavers, traditionally easy targets, now carry heavier armaments and larger crews trained specifically for combat. These changes force your crew to develop new tactics and explore different types of targets. Coastal raids become more common, with your ships striking isolated plantations and small ports that lack adequate defenses. These operations require different skills than ship-to-ship combat, emphasizing stealth, speed, and the ability to fight effectively on land as well as sea. Your democratic principles prove adaptable to these new challenges, with crew members voting on target selection and tactical approaches just as they do for maritime operations. But land-based raids also raise ethical questions that pure maritime piracy largely avoided. Attacking ships meant taking cargo from distant investors and insurance companies who could absorb the losses without significant hardship. Raiding plantations and settlements means confronting ordinary colonists who've built their lives in these dangerous frontier regions. The moral weight of these actions creates tensions within your crew that democratic discussion can acknowledge but not easily resolve. These debates reveal the philosophical sophistication that your floating society has developed over months of collective governance. Men who began as simple sailors now engage in complex discussions about the nature of property, the legitimacy of colonial authority, and the moral boundaries of resistance to oppression. Your ship's articles evolve to address these new ethical challenges, establishing principles that distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable targets, based on criteria that reflect your crew's collective moral reasoning. The intelligence network that supports these operations grows increasingly complex and valuable. Corrupt officials provide information about treasure shipments and naval patrol schedules. Disgruntled colonists offer details about plantation defenses and colonial militia capabilities. Other pirate crews share observations about changing security measures and successful tactical innovations. This web of informants and allies creates a shadow communication system that spans the entire Caribbean basin. Your personal role in this network reflects your evolution from desperate recruit to trusted member of the pirate community. The Quartermaster assigns you to cultivate relationships with specific contacts, men whose information and assistance could prove crucial to your crew's survival and success. These relationships require skills you never developed as a common sailor. The ability to inspire trust, to evaluate the reliability of information, and to maintain complex webs of mutual obligation and benefit. The psychological pressures of this lifestyle continue to test every man's commitment to the democratic principles that define your society. The constant threat of violent death, the isolation from legitimate society, and the moral ambiguity of your actions combine to create stresses that no amount of wealth can fully compensate. Some crew members crack under these pressures, becoming increasingly violent or unstable in ways that threaten the unity and effectiveness of your brotherhood. Your articles provide mechanisms for dealing with such problems, but they're crude tools that often fail to address the underlying causes of psychological breakdown. Men who've served faithfully for months can suddenly become liabilities that endanger everyone around them. The democratic process that governs all other aspects of your society struggles with questions of mental competence and the rights of individuals whose judgment has been compromised by the stresses of pirate life. These challenges intensify as reports reach your crew about the fates of other pirate societies. Ships that once flew the black flag of freedom now serve as warnings in colonial harbors, their crews decorating gibbets as reminders of what awaits those who challenge imperial authority. Famous captains whose names once inspired fear and respect now exist only in the songs that commemorate their brief, violent careers. The mathematics of survival become increasingly stark as the authorities' response to piracy intensifies. Naval patrols multiply in frequency and effectiveness, equipped with faster ships and more experienced crews, specifically trained for anti-piracy operations. Colonial militias receive better arms and training, making coastal raids more dangerous and less profitable. Even the corrupt officials and merchants who once provided essential support begin to distance themselves from the pirate community as the risks of association increase. Your crew responds to these pressures with the resilience and adaptability that democratic governance has fostered. Plans become more sophisticated, with multiple contingencies for every operation. Security measures multiply, with elaborate codes and procedures designed to protect the intelligence network that keeps your society functioning. Training intensifies, with every man expected to master multiple skills that might prove crucial in emergency situations. The ship itself undergoes constant modification and improvement, reflecting both your crew's growing expertise and their awareness of the challenges ahead. Hidden compartments conceal weapons and treasure from cursory searches. False partitions create secret spaces where wanted men can hide during inspections. The vessel's external appearance is altered to make recognition more difficult, with removable decorative elements that can transform its profile when viewed from a distance. These technical improvements parallel the evolution of your democratic institutions as they adapt to changing circumstances. The Articles of Agreement undergo regular revision, with new provisions addressing lessons learned from recent operations and changing threats from external authorities. The processes of debate and decision-making become more sophisticated, incorporating formal procedures for handling classified information and sensitive negotiations. Your personal growth within this evolving society reflects the broader transformation of pirate culture from simple criminality to sophisticated resistance. The skills you've developed extend far beyond basic seamanship to encompass intelligence gathering, tactical planning, cross-cultural communication, and the complex arts of democratic leadership. You've become not just a pirate, but a citizen of a unique society that exists nowhere else in the world. But citizenship in this floating democracy carries responsibilities that grow heavier as the external pressures mount. Every decision you participate in, every vote you cast, every operation you support, contributes to the survival or destruction of principles that could reshape the relationship between common people and established authority throughout the colonial world. The stakes of your democratic experiment extend far beyond the personal fortunes of individual crew members. The knowledge that your society represents something larger than itself becomes both a source of pride and a burden that weighs on every man's conscience. You're not just fighting for personal freedom and financial gain, but for the possibility that ordinary people can govern themselves effectively without the hereditary rulers and appointed authorities that dominate legitimate society. The success or failure of your floating democracy will influence how future generations think about the possibilities of self-governance. As your ship sails through the warm Caribbean waters toward its next encounter with Spanish authority or English law, you carry with you the hopes and fears of everyone who's ever dreamed of a life lived free from arbitrary power. The Golden Age that created the conditions for your transformation may be ending, but the principles you fought for and the society you've helped create will survive in the memories and aspirations of those who come after. The horizon ahead holds both promise and peril in equal measure, but you'll face whatever comes with the confidence of a man who's chosen his own destiny and the support of brothers who've made the same impossible choice. Your floating democracy sails on, carrying its cargo of revolutionary ideals toward whatever fate awaits those bold enough to challenge the fundamental assumptions of their age. The intelligence that reaches you during these final months of the Golden Age carries an ominous weight that transforms every conversation in every tavern, from excited speculation to worried calculation. Ships that once sailed proudly under the black flag now burn on distant horizons, their crews either dead or bound for the gallows in chains so heavy they can barely walk. The names that once struck terror into merchant captains now appear on wanted posters with bounties so substantial that former allies begin eyeing each other with uncomfortable speculation. Your quartermaster returns from a meeting with other crew leaders, bearing news that chills the blood of even the most hardened veterans. A massive naval expedition is being assembled in English ports, not just a few frigates assigned to patrol duties, but an entire fleet commanded by officers whose reputations were forged in the Great European Wars. These aren't colonial administrators playing at military command, but professional naval warriors who've spent their careers perfecting the art of destroying enemy fleets. The Spanish response proves equally systematic and merciless. New fortifications rise at every major port, bristling with cannons specifically designed to sink fast-moving pirate vessels. Treasure fleets now sail with escorts so powerful that attacking them would be tantamount to suicide. Even more disturbing, Spanish authorities have begun offering substantial rewards, not just for the capture of pirate crews, but for information leading to their discovery. The network of informants and corrupt officials that once provided your society with crucial intelligence is beginning to work against you. But perhaps most troubling of all are the reports about former pirates who've accepted royal pardons only to find themselves pressed into service as pirate hunters. Men who once shared your democratic ideals now command government vessels specifically tasked with destroying the floating republics they once called home. They know your tactics because they helped develop them. They understand your hideouts because they once sheltered there. They can predict your movements because they once participated in identical operations. The psychological warfare proves as devastating as any naval bombardment. Captured pirates are interrogated not just about their own crews, but about the broader pirate community, the locations of safe harbors, the identities of sympathetic merchants, and the internal workings of democratic governance that authorities find so threatening. Some men break under torture or the promise of clemency, providing information that leads to the destruction of entire pirate societies. Your own crew grapples with these revelations during increasingly frequent meetings that test the democratic processes you've spent months perfecting. The debates now focus less on which prizes to attack and more on fundamental questions of survival strategy. Some members argue for immediate dispersal, with individual pirates abandoning their ships to disappear into colonial populations where their past might remain hidden. Others propose consolidation, bringing multiple crews together to create fleets powerful enough to fight the naval expeditions being sent against them. The most radical proposal comes from Murphy, the old salt whose wisdom has guided your crew through numerous crises. He suggests abandoning the Caribbean entirely, sailing to distant waters where pirate hunters haven't yet penetrated and colonial authority remains weak enough to challenge. Madagascar, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific coast of South America, all offer possibilities for continuing the democratic experiment under more favorable conditions. Each option carries profound implications for the future of your floating society. Dispersal means the end of your democratic brotherhood, trading collective strength for individual anonymity. Consolidation risks creating targets so large that no amount of firepower could protect them from determined naval assault. Relocation offers the possibility of survival, but requires abandoning the familiar waters and established networks that have sustained your society thus far. The decision-making process reveals both the strengths and limitations of democratic governance under extreme pressure. Every man's voice carries equal weight in these deliberations, but the complexity of the choices makes consensus increasingly difficult to achieve. Veterans argue from experience, while newer recruits offer perspectives unburdened by past failures. Cultural differences that once enriched your discussions now create fundamental disagreements about acceptable levels of risk and appropriate responses to existential threats. Your personal evolution within this crisis reflects the broader transformation of pirate society from confident rebellion to desperate resistance. The skills you've developed as both sailor and citizen now serve purposes you never anticipated when you first signed the Articles of Agreement. Intelligence gathering becomes a matter of life and death rather than operational advantage. Navigation skills must account for naval patrols and safe passage routes rather than simply finding the next prize. Even your understanding of democratic principles deepens as you wrestle with questions about collective survival versus individual conscience. The daily routines of ship life, take on new significance as your crew prepares for whatever decision emerges from the democratic process. Weapons maintenance becomes more meticulous, with every pistol and cutlass inspected daily for signs of corrosion or mechanical failure. Navigation charts receive constant updates with new information about naval patrol patterns and safe anchorages. The ship itself undergoes continuous modification, with crew members working around the clock to enhance speed, stealth, and defensive capabilities. These preparations occur against a backdrop of increasing isolation from the broader pirate community. Ships that once gathered regularly in friendly harbours now avoid contact with each other, fearful that association might lead to mutual destruction. The informal communication network that once bound pirate crews together begins fragmenting as trust erodes under the pressure of bounties and pardons. Even longtime allies become potential threats when survival depends on avoiding detection by increasingly sophisticated hunter-killers. The psychological toll of this isolation weighs heavily on men accustomed to the camaraderie and mutual support that defined pirate society. Conversations that once ranged freely across topics of common interest now focus obsessively on immediate threats and survival strategies. The songs and stories that once celebrated pirate achievements now serve as elegies for lost friends and vanished freedoms. Even the democratic meetings that anchored your society's identity become exercises in managing fear rather than planning for prosperity. Your Quartermaster struggles to maintain the morale and cohesion that democratic governance requires. The equal distribution of information, a cornerstone of your society's transparency, becomes problematic when that information consists primarily of reports about captured crews and successful naval operations. The collective decision-making that once empowered every crew member now forces individuals to confront their own mortality and the probable doom of everything they've worked to create. Yet even under these extreme pressures, the democratic principles that define your society prove remarkably resilient. Men who could easily desert during shore leave continue reporting for duty and participating in collective decisions. Debates that could fragment the crew into hostile factions somehow produce compromises that preserve unity while acknowledging legitimate disagreements. The articles of agreement that once seemed like simple practical arrangements now reveal themselves as profound statements about human dignity and collective responsibility. The resolution, when it finally comes, emerges not from a single dramatic vote, but from a gradual convergence of opinion shaped by weeks of discussion and debate. Your crew chooses a modified version of Murphy's relocation proposal, but with elements of the consolidation strategy included. You'll join with 2 other democratic crews to form a small fleet capable of mutual protection during the dangerous voyage to new hunting grounds in the Indian Ocean. This decision requires immediate and dramatic changes to your operational methods. The ship must be prepared for an ocean crossing that will test every aspect of your seamanship and democratic governance. Supplies must be accumulated for a journey that could last months without the possibility of friendly ports or reliable resupply. Most challenging of all, 3 independent crews with their own democratic traditions must somehow merge into a single effective unit without sacrificing the principles that each values above life itself. The negotiations between crews reveal the sophistication that pirate democracy has achieved during its brief flowering. Representatives from each ship meet to draft new articles of agreement that preserve the essential features of democratic governance while accommodating the practical requirements of fleet operations. Questions of command structure, resource allocation, and decision-making authority require careful compromise between competing visions of how free men should organize themselves for collective action. Your own role in these negotiations reflects your evolution from desperate recruit to experienced democratic citizen. The other crews recognize your ship's success in maintaining unity and effectiveness under pressure, and they seek to incorporate your innovations into the new fleet structure. Your Quartermaster finds himself elected to a position of authority within the combined organization, a testament to the respect that democratic competence earns among men who've chosen freedom over security. The practical preparations for departure consume every waking moment as your floating democracy transforms itself for its most ambitious venture yet. Charts of distant oceans must be obtained through carefully cultivated contacts who risk their own lives by providing such information. Specialists in Indian Ocean navigation and weather patterns must be recruited or their knowledge somehow acquired through other means. Even basic supplies require different considerations when the nearest friendly port might be thousands of miles away. These logistical challenges pale beside the emotional weight of leaving behind the Caribbean waters that witnessed your transformation from exploited sailor to democratic citizen. Every familiar landmark carries memories of successful captures, narrow escapes, and the gradual development of the skills and relationships that define your identity. The coral reefs where you learned advanced seamanship, the hidden coves where democratic debates shaped your society's evolution, the merchant routes where you proved that free men could outfight and outthink the professional forces of imperial power. But nostalgia becomes a luxury that your society can no longer afford as reports arrive of the final destruction of Nassau and the capture of the last major pirate stronghold in the Bahamas. The golden age that created the conditions for democratic piracy is ending with mathematical certainty, and only those crews bold enough to seek new opportunities in distant waters have any hope of preserving the revolutionary principles they've fought to establish. Your fleet's departure from Caribbean waters occurs under cover of darkness, with each ship following carefully planned routes designed to avoid the naval patrols that now sweep the traditional pirate hunting grounds with systematic thoroughness. The navigation requires skills that few pirates possess, demanding precise calculations and constant vigilance as you guide 3 ships through waters increasingly dominated by enemies who know your capabilities and limitations. The first weeks of the ocean crossing test every aspect of your democratic society in ways that coastal piracy never did. Resource allocation becomes critical when there's no possibility of resupply until you reach distant ports whose locations exist only on charts of questionable accuracy. Weather management requires collective decisions about risk and safety when storms could scatter or destroy your small fleet. Even basic communication between ships demands new procedures and protocols that preserve democratic consultation while acknowledging the practical requirements of oceanic navigation. The psychological challenges prove as demanding as the physical ones. Men accustomed to the regular stimulation of captures and shore leave must somehow maintain morale during weeks of empty horizons and endless routine. The democratic meetings that once focused on immediate tactical decisions now address abstract questions about your society's future and the kind of life you hope to build in whatever distant lands await your arrival. These discussions require a philosophical sophistication that few sailors possessed before joining pirate crews. Yet your men rise to the challenge with remarkable intellectual courage. Your personal growth during this transformative voyage reflects the broader evolution of pirate society from regional rebellion to global diaspora. The skills you've developed extend far beyond seamanship and combat to encompass diplomacy, cultural adaptation, and the complex arts of maintaining democratic governance under conditions of extreme uncertainty. You've become not just a citizen of your floating republic, but an ambassador of democratic principles to whatever societies you encounter in distant waters. The Indian Ocean that eventually appears on your horizon represents more than just a new hunting ground for democratic pirates. It offers the possibility that the revolutionary ideals developed in Caribbean waters might take root in different cultural soil, adapting to local conditions while preserving the essential features of equality and collective self-governance. Your floating democracy carries with it the seeds of transformation that could influence the relationship between rulers and ruled throughout the colonial world. As your fleet approaches the strange coasts and unfamiliar ports that will define the next chapter of your society's evolution, you carry within yourself the accumulated wisdom of men who've dared to imagine a different way of organizing human relationships. The Golden Age that created you may be ending in Caribbean waters, but the principles you fought for and the society you've helped create will continue their voyage toward whatever destiny awaits those brave enough to choose freedom over security, democracy over hierarchy, and brotherhood over the lonely pursuit of individual advantage. The warm waters of the Indian Ocean stretch endlessly before your small fleet, carrying your floating democracy toward encounters that will test everything you've learned about the possibilities and limitations of self-governance among free men. Behind you lie the Caribbean graveyards where the dreams of countless pirates now rest beneath the waves. Ahead lies the unknown territory where those dreams might yet find new expression in forms you can barely imagine. The horizon that greets your weary eyes, after months of oceanic crossing, bears little resemblance to the familiar Caribbean waters you've left behind. Here, in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, the very color of the sea seems different, a deeper blue that speaks of greater depths and older mysteries. The monsoon winds that fill your sails carry scents you've never encountered, spices and incense that hint at civilizations far more ancient than the colonial outposts you once knew. Your first glimpse of Madagascar's coastline reveals an island of staggering size and complexity, its mountains shrouded in mists that seem to promise both opportunity and danger. The native kingdoms here operate according to rules your Caribbean experience never prepared you for, and the existing pirate settlements scattered along the coast represent a different evolution of the same democratic principles that govern your own society. The port of St. Mary's Island, when your fleet finally drops anchor in its protected harbour, presents a fascinating study in how pirate democracy adapts to local conditions. The crews that established themselves here years ago have developed relationships with Malagasy rulers based on mutual benefit rather than simple exploitation. Pirates provide military assistance and manufactured goods in exchange for safe harbour and the right to establish their own governing structures within carefully defined territories. Your quartermaster immediately begins the delicate process of negotiating your fleet's integration into this existing community. The established crews view newcomers with suspicion born of hard experience, knowing that too many pirates in one location eventually attracts the attention of naval forces that even the Indian Ocean cannot forever exclude. But they also recognize the value of fresh blood and new ideas, particularly when those ideas come from men who've survived the collapse of the Caribbean pirate republics. The negotiations reveal how differently democratic principles can manifest when transplanted to new cultural soil. The Madagascar pirates have developed more formal governmental structures than anything you knew in the Caribbean, with elected councils that serve specific terms and written constitutions that codify rights and responsibilities in greater detail than your ship's articles ever attempted. Yet the essential spirit remains the same, the conviction that free men can govern themselves more effectively than any hereditary or appointed authority. Your personal introduction to this evolved form of pirate democracy comes through assignment to a cultural liaison role, helping your Caribbean crew members adapt to local customs while learning the complex web of relationships that keeps the Madagascar pirate community functioning. The linguistic challenges alone prove formidable, with conversations requiring translation between English, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Arabic, and various Malagasy dialects, depending on which groups are participating. But language barriers pale beside the cultural adjustments required to function effectively in this new environment. The relationship between pirates and the indigenous population operates according to protocols that took years to establish and could be destroyed by a single thoughtless act of disrespect or misunderstanding. Your crew must learn not just new sailing conditions and different prey, but entirely new ways of thinking about the relationship between your floating democracy and the land-based societies that surround it. The Indian Ocean trade routes that become your new hunting grounds present challenges and opportunities unlike anything the Caribbean offered. The merchant vessels here carry cargoes of silk and spices, precious stones and exotic woods, ivory and rare metals that command higher prices than sugar and tobacco ever could. But they also travel under the protection of trading companies and local rulers whose military capabilities far exceed anything European colonies could deploy in distant waters. Your first capture in these new waters proves both exhilarating and educational. The Arab dhow that falls to your coordinated fleet attack carries a cargo of Persian carpets and Indian textiles worth more than several Caribbean prizes combined. But the negotiation that follows the capture reveals complexities that simple ship-to-ship piracy never involved. The merchant captain claims protection from a local sultan whose friendship the Madagascar pirate community values highly, creating diplomatic considerations that must be weighed against immediate profit. The resolution of this dilemma through democratic debate demonstrates how your society continues to evolve under new pressures. The captured merchant is released with a portion of his cargo intact, a gesture of respect to the Sultan that preserves crucial political relationships while still providing substantial profit to your crews. It's a sophisticated approach that reflects the maturation of pirate democracy from simple opportunism to complex statecraft. The cultural exchanges that result from this new environment prove as valuable as any material plunder. Your crew members learn navigation techniques developed by Arab sailors over centuries of Indian Ocean travel, methods that make Caribbean seamanship seem crude by comparison. In return, you share the democratic innovations and tactical developments that emerged from Caribbean piracy's unique pressures, contributions that enhance the effectiveness of the entire Madagascar community. The monsoon seasons that govern Indian Ocean sailing impose rhythms on pirate life that Caribbean crews never experienced. Months of intensive activity, when favorable winds make long-range hunting possible, alternate with periods of enforced inactivity when weather conditions make oceanic travel suicidal. These seasonal cycles require different approaches to resource management, crew morale, and the democratic processes that keep your society functioning during extended periods of involuntary idleness. Your role within the community expands as your adaptability and cultural sensitivity prove valuable to the complex negotiations required for survival in this multicultural environment. The skills you developed as a democratic citizen in Caribbean waters now serve diplomatic functions that influence relationships between different pirate crews, local rulers, and the indigenous populations whose cooperation makes everything else possible. The intelligence networks that support pirate operations in the Indian Ocean prove far more sophisticated than anything the Caribbean ever developed. Information flows through trading contacts that span from the African coast to the Spice Islands of Indonesia, carried by merchants, sailors, and diplomatic envoys, whose loyalty must be carefully cultivated and constantly maintained. Your crew contributes to this network while learning to navigate its complexities, adding Caribbean innovations to an existing system that took decades to establish. The seasonal gathering that brings together representatives from pirate communities across the Indian Ocean reveals the true scope of what your democratic experiment has become. Crews from dozens of different backgrounds and nationalities meet to coordinate activities, resolve disputes, and plan operations that require resources and capabilities beyond what any single group could muster. It's democracy on a scale that would impress political theorists in any legitimate nation, yet it operates entirely outside the bounds of recognized governmental authority. Your participation in these gatherings marks your complete transformation from desperate Caribbean sailor to accomplished practitioner of international pirate diplomacy. The perspectives you offer, shaped by both Caribbean experience and Madagascar adaptation, contribute to decisions that influence pirate communities from the Red Sea to the South China Sea. You've become not just a citizen of your floating democracy, but a voice in the larger conversation about how free people can organize themselves across cultural and national boundaries. The challenges that emerge from this expanded scope test every principle and practice your society has developed over years of democratic evolution. Resource allocation becomes incredibly complex when operations span thousands of miles and involve dozens of independent crews. Dispute resolution requires procedures sophisticated enough to handle conflicts between groups with fundamentally different cultural assumptions about justice and fairness. Yet somehow the democratic mechanisms that served you well in smaller contexts prove scalable to these larger challenges. The same principles of equality, transparency, and collective decision-making that governed your ship's articles now influence decisions that affect thousands of pirates across multiple oceans. It's a testament to the fundamental soundness of the democratic insights that emerged from the desperate circumstances of Caribbean piracy. The evolution continues as your community grapples with questions that no previous pirate society ever faced. What obligations do successful crews owe to less fortunate ones? How should resources be allocated between immediate operational needs and long-term community development? What role should pirate societies play in the broader political and economic relationships that shape the regions where they operate? These discussions reveal the intellectual sophistication that democratic practice has fostered among men who began as simple sailors seeking escape from exploitation and oppression. The same individuals who once struggled with basic questions of fair plunder division now debate complex issues of political philosophy and international relations with insight that would credit any university or royal court. Your own intellectual development parallels this broader transformation, as responsibilities that once seemed far beyond your capabilities become routine aspects of your daily existence. The desperate merchant sailor, who first signed pirate articles seeking nothing more than fair treatment and adequate food, has evolved into a diplomatic representative capable of negotiating complex agreements between groups with conflicting interests and incompatible worldviews. The personal relationships that sustain this remarkable society continue to deepen and strengthen despite the geographical dispersion and cultural diversity that characterize Indian Ocean pirate communities. The brotherhood that began on the deck of a single ship now encompasses men from every corner of the known world, united by shared commitment to democratic principles rather than common language, religion, or national origin. But even as your society reaches new heights of sophistication and influence, the shadow of its inevitable destruction continues to grow. The same naval forces that ended the Golden Age in Caribbean waters are slowly extending their reach into the Indian Ocean, bringing with them the systematic approach to pirate elimination that proved so devastatingly effective in your former hunting grounds. The question is no longer whether this expansion will occur, but whether your evolved democratic society can develop new forms of resistance or adaptation that will allow its principles to survive even the destruction of its current manifestations. The Golden Age of Piracy lasted barely 80 years, a mere blink of an eye in the grand sweep of history. Yet in that brief moment, desperate men created something extraordinary, something that would outlive their ships, their treasures, and their lives. They proved that democracy wasn't just a dream confined to philosophy books and university halls. It was a living, breathing reality that could flourish even on the rolling decks of outlaw vessels, even among men who had nothing left to lose except their newfound freedom. Tonight, you've witnessed the birth, triumph, and inevitable fall of history's most unlikely republics. But their legacy lives on, carried forward by every person who dares to believe that ordinary people deserve a voice in their own destiny.